Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boy Jack and Dave here at the Irish Hotspur, joined by yet again part two of the crisis management episode, joined by Flav. Flav, how are you?
Brilliant.
We apologize for yet again bringing you in under sort of dire circumstances. I wish it was under, like you had brought up earlier, maybe more jovial circumstances, but thanks for joining us.
Remind me what had happened around the first. So it was a few months back. So what was
The thumbnail we used was Conte versus Levy standoff, and I believe the title was Daniel Levy losing faith in Antonio Conte. So you could say we were on the right track.
Yeah. That felt like the conversation that we were having throughout the entire season. Like from day one, the football's been abject, which is weird because, and I'm not going to say anything that people don't already know, but at the end of last season, football was good. Like the team had bought into Conte's ideas. We'd signed two excellent players in Bentancur and Kulusevski, and feels like we were building momentum. But from the start of this season, something just wasn't right. Didn't play. We played poor football all season. There isn't one game. There's games we've had good results and we've managed the game correctly and done well in terms of Chelsea, Man City. The West Ham game was good. That little period where Conte wasn't there, which tells you something. But it wasn't blowing teams away. It wasn't impressive football. We just managed the situation correctly and did what we need to win, and which I guess is what Conte's sort of mainstay, his main idea, his stable house is to control the game, be functional, don't make mistakes, and stifle the opponent through numbers and bodies. But it doesn't surprise me that the same conversation, essentially the conversation we had before, is what led to the situation we find ourselves in now. And there's a lot of people to blame for that.
Yeah. Let me just ask you there quickly, Flav. You mentioned last year that the football looked good, a lot of fans were enjoying it, and then this season it sort of completely flipped. From the very beginning of the season, it looked not lazy, but it looked tired. It looked sort of, slow and stuff like that compared to what we were seeing the season before. Where do you think it went wrong?
I think, the most likely situation, I think, is that the players got fed up with Conte very quickly. And they didn't believe in him, and he wasn't leading them. He was blaming them when things weren't going right. The messages that he was coming out from him were consistently contradictory. 1 minute these are the best, the most mentally strong bunch of players I've ever seen. I think was a quote he said, and then a few months later they're cowards or they're selfish. And so if that's the messaging, and another example, sorry, quickly while I remember it, is that if you believe the stuff in the press, is that he called a team meeting for people to air their grievances. Everyone was in the room, and then they left. He says, "You guys sort this out." Like the geezer didn't like I was fully on board and in love with Conte when he arrived, because you're thinking this is it. He gets it. He's going to force Levy to spend. He's going to change the ethos at the club. But he made it poisonous. And I can't say that I've ever loathed the manager as much as I loathe Antonio Conte right now after leaving. I can't stand him. I think what he did, the way he conducted himself, and let me say this as well. I agree with 90% of what he said after the Southampton game, but it isn't his role to do. It might be his role internally, do all the pressure to do it there, make it happen, but to pour petrol on a bin fire that was or is Tottenham was never going to end well. It's either childish, or it's incredibly naive, or it's just he calculated his exit out. But if you want out, you can just resign. Just go in there and say, Daniel, I can't do this. I've had a terrible year personally. I need out. I need some time out. But what he didn't do, what he did instead was leave the house and set fire to it on the way out. And then we're now all burning inside that house.
I feel like that's what Conte does, though, Flav, because I was going to say, without maybe the experience of success or trophies that Conte has, it feels like we have been given, to a degree, maybe the full Conte experience. I know you have, where it's like you have that honeymoon period where you're falling in love with him, sort of his mentality, the way he sort of changes the whole culture in and around the squad. And then it all ends in the most fiery breakup possible as well, where, like you said, he pours petrol on it. So I see where you're coming from on it. That's part of Conte. That's not his. It's maybe kind of part of his allure. Let's be honest. Like that's his whole.
The emotional reaction for sure. It was part of his allure, but when it goes tits up, it's horrible.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, when you were talking about the meeting that Antonio Conte set up, and then everybody, as soon as the last person arrived, he walked out. Me personally, I think the reason why he done that was to see who the leaders are in the squad, to see who's going to stand up, call people out, tell them it's not good enough. Because I do believe that we have a severe lack of leadership within that squad. And I think that's what he was aiming to do. Rather than him constantly having to come out and bollock them week in, week out, I think he was looking for other people to step up and help him. But it didn't look like anyone was willing to do that. So that's why we're here today.
Yeah, but you could quite possibly be right there, right? But if that isn't happening, then you then have to take the lead. You then have to create those conversations to get to the point. Not just saying this is all shit, right? You lot shit, no leaders, therefore I'm going. And not only that, I'm going to go in this way. So actually, look, guys, where's the leaders? Just find them. If we can't find leaders, then sign them. Remember, we signed these players under him. He was so vocal about the ones that didn't work. Danjuma, or that he didn't want. Danjuma and Jed Spence didn't want them. Fine. The other players you did, and they've been pretty average. Bordering on poor. Like Richarlison's season has been horrendous, in my opinion.
Offer solutions with the criticisms, or
manage, coach, do what you're paid £15 million a year to do. The most expensive manager, or one of, in Europe, and your reaction is to go, "All my players are selfish. I can't do this. I'm going. Bye." Yeah, you're pathetic.
We'll talk about some of these players and see what maybe they do to them. But we do apologize, Flav, that we don't bring you under good circumstances, like I said. But the first question we're going to be kind of debating here is like, is this a crisis or is this not? Because Stellini seems to think that the opposite is the case. He said before the Everton game that we're not even in a crisis, and that a crisis is actually only coming from the football media. Many Spurs fans we even do know, though, actually have agreed with Stellini and also seem to share that opinion that it is something kind of blown up by the media. But we are, I would say, kind of hugely underrepresented sort of in the Spurs kind of media realm. So it does kind of make sense maybe why we always do seem like we're kind of bullied on in these sort of situations. But what do you make of the current
situation? When you say we, do you mean you guys?
We know, just as Spurs fans. I mean,
right. Sorry.
No. What do you think, though? Is it an exaggerated crisis, or is it a crisis?
And I mean, look, it's relative, right? Are we in crisis like QPR are in crisis, where they could go down to League One and they've won one game in 20? No. The answer is no. The answer is Tottenham Hotspur will always generate enough money to be in and around the top six. It will always be the case. That's our reality. But you've got to look at it from a Spurs fan's perspective, relative to other clubs around us. Actually, do you know what? It doesn't matter. Relative to Arsenal, yes, we're in crisis. Look what they've done. This is part of why this is so bad is because of Arsenal's shown a blueprint to how you can be successful without being Manchester City, without being Chelsea, what Newcastle will become, and so on. So there is a blueprint there. This is a blueprint that has been laid out before us before as well. And Liverpool did the same thing. They knew what they needed. They got it. And they won the league. They won the Champions League. Arsenal may win the league this year. So in that instance, it does feel like a crisis. But relative to the wider football sphere, then no, of course not. It's just a very difficult period. Now, the issue, though, my main concern isn't what's happened on the pitch this season. That's a symptom. My main concern now is Daniel Levy and ENIC, because we have found ourselves in this situation. And I think the last time I came on, I was a little bit more defensive of Daniel Levy and ENIC than I would be now. And the scariest part of it is that we're potentially in the same situation as we were before Conte signed, but worse, Paratigi's now banned. So while Spurs are not in a crisis and probably will never be in a crisis in real terms, in real footballing terms, because a crisis is something significant. It's just we're kind of void of hope and void of a plan, and it all feels a little bit rudderless. And that's something that I've never, like, whether or not you agree with Daniel Levy's transfer policy or not, I never thought that we were rudderless. I thought that he had a plan. I might not agree with it. I might wish he spent more money, but there's a plan in place. And if there's a plan in place, sometimes you just got to get on with it, even if you're not quite happy with what that direction is. Now it just feels like, I don't know if you saw from The Athletic earlier. I'll see if I can find it quickly. There was a comment, there was an article, and it says Tottenham are still at the due diligence stage of their search, gathering information on candidates that have not progressed to the interview stage yet. This work is continuing in Paratici's absence. If he wins his appeal in 2 weeks' time, he will return to his role at the club and will work with Levy to oversee the next stage of the process. Right, so there's two issues there. One, we've not even got to the point where we're ready to interview anybody. Right, that's Chelsea could appoint Nagelsmann or Luis Enrique today. That could happen. They're working quickly. While we drag our feet, managers will commit or sign for other clubs.
Yeah.
De Zerbi and Nagelsmann, if you believe the reports, have both expressed anxiety about taking the Tottenham job. Nagelsmann has said, or to a source in Football Insider 27 or whatever that godforsaken website is that he'd worried that Tottenham move would damage his career and his reputation. So that's the first part. Why was that? Because of how Daniel Levy and other managers who had serial winners have fared under him. And the other thing is this Paratici situation. Now, if Paratici was guilty of I don't care what he did in Italy.
Yeah, neither do I. But
I'm happy that he's been with us to sign the players that he's had, because out of all the stuff that's been happening in the last 3 years, he's been one of the positive lights, in my opinion, the positive aspects too. So even if he was guilty, I would still have hired him. Even if I knew he was guilty of these cooking the books in Juventus, I would have still hired him, because who gives a shit, really? It's a bit of financial sort of trickery. Look at what Chelsea and
financial housery.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very good. So look, it's fine. He's banned in Italy. Whatever, get him in. He could improve Tottenham, and he has improved them. But what I don't, and I'm frustrated by, is the messaging from the club was we've been blindsided by this global ban.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? If he's been banned in Italy, then there's absolutely no reason why FIFA can't look at that and go, well, actually, he's committed this crime. And look, he was wrong to do it. What they did in Juventus was incorrect and against the rules, and that he should have been banned for it. There was a massive likelihood that FIFA were going to look at that and go, well, he's operating in Italy. We can't allow him to operate anywhere else in football because of what he did there. The fact that they've been blindsided by this is alarming. Or they're just getting that messaging out so that it feels like they believed he was innocent. Whatever it is, yeah.
I think they stuck their head that far down the sand, honestly. That when you have your head that far down the sand, you can pretend anything isn't happening, really.
I can't believe that, man. I can't believe that Daniel Levy is in. You say whatever you want of him. He's a brilliant businessman.
Yeah.
There's no chance that he was blindsided by this. Surely.
I think willingly he was blindsided by it, by his own
ignorant.
volition. The other thing, too, what you mentioned about the indecisiveness at Tottenham Hotspur, it made me think like a day passes at Chelsea, a week passes at Tottenham Hotspur, it feels like, right? That sort of is how it works. Feels like we go through all this red tape and yellow tape when it comes to making decisions. Feels like Spurs are the type of company that has 1,000 different subcommittees to the original committee when making a decision, and it just doesn't get done right away. I'm with you.
Where was this due diligence when they hired Paratici? Where's that due diligence?
Spot on.
Bullshit.
I'll be honest. I think Daniel Levy ignored it. I think Daniel Levy is well aware of everything going on with Paratici. I think he ignored it because apparently he's been a long-term admirer of Paratici and how he sort of conducts his business. And I think he was willing to sort of put all that aside to bring this guy in and to sort of help us get out of a situation. I agree with you, Flav, in terms of that we're not in a crisis compared to the likes of QPR. But I think when you look at where we are in the Premier League and where we've got to, which is like sort of consistent top four finishes, I think we are in big danger of losing that going forward if we don't get this right. I think we've been the beneficiary of the World Cup being mid-season and other teams sort of being in transition, that we're still lucky to be in for where we are right now. We've been hanging in there for quite some time, even though we haven't really been getting the results. But I think the next manager appointment, if it's underwhelming, I think it could easily send us back down the league, just like it did under Nuno. You've got the likes of Newcastle who seem to be getting things right. I'm sure they'll be battling that back there next season. Liverpool, I'm sure will be back. I have a sneaky feeling the next appointment at Chelsea will probably get it right. They'll probably be back. You've got Brighton, who seems to be doing a lot right, coming up their era. So for me, I think we are sort of in danger of being knocked out of that Champions League. And then I question, once you sort of you're outside of that top four spot, how long is it going to be before we sort of get back in there, looking at some of the other teams coming to the fore? And I think, considering from where the club was built, from when Enoch took over from the 90s to where we are now, they've done a good job up until about 2018, 2019 to get us where we are. But I think we're in danger of falling back down to exactly where they were when they first took over. And I'm of the opinion that I think Daniel Levy is sort of lost. I think he knew how to build us, but I don't think he knows how to rebuild us to be able to push us on to the next level, which is to challenge. I think he's relying on a lot of experienced football people without having any sort of connection to the club. The likes of a Jose Mourinho, Paratici, and Antonio Conte. I think he's looking for them to sort of guide us to the next level, but also they don't want to change the business model to match what these guys want or what they need. They're not sitting here looking, to go through 3-4 transfer windows until we get teams right and then go on and push for league title. They want it now. And I just think if the club are going to go down that mountain, if the club do want to sort of push on to the next level to win trophies, stop flapping about with it. If you bring in these guys, spend the money that they need to address the squad, the majority of the squad in the one transfer window. And I think a lot of Spurs fans, they don't like bad stuff being said about the club, and I get it. Like as soon as the word crisis came out, Stellini denied it. A lot of fans are saying it's because, a lot of pundits of Liverpool, United, Arsenal, there's very underrepresented by Tottenham and stuff like that. But I do think we should heed some warning to sort of some of the things that's been said and realise that we could very easily slip outside the top four, and it could take a long time to claw back.
Do you agree with rudderless
Spurs fans? I think that would be a crisis, considering how long we spent supporting this club to even get to this point.
I mean, I'm 41, so I remember what that was like supporting Spurs in the late 90s, 2000s, and it was awful. It was awful. I had a great time. I loved following the club, but in terms of football, like watching Gary Doherty switch from a centre back to a centre forward is something I never want to see again. And I don't care how bad things get. We will never go back to that. But look, I think you're right in that. Look, if we slip out the top four, no one has a right to be there. And you're right that what Brighton are doing with De Zerbi, and not just Brighton, but what Paul Barber has done there, who used to be at Spurs, is incredible. There are going to be these challenges. I can't imagine Brentford are going to be around there for very long, but who knows? But yeah, you're right. Chelsea will be better. Liverpool will be better. Arsenal will be as strong next year, if not stronger. And obviously, you've got Manchester United. If they get bought out by the Qataris, then they will be the most powerful club in the world again. And obviously, Man City are Man City. Spurs will be left behind unless Daniel Levy changes the way he views the transfer market. Another big thing that happened this season was that the statement after I can't remember when it was actually, if it was maybe after the January transfer window.
To the Supporters Trust. Yeah.
Yeah. So was it? It was a while back now, so I might butcher this, but generally the gist was that the transfer market was being manipulated by clubs. They were overpaying for players. And it meant that a club that was trying to operate within the rules, in inverted commas, were being left behind, and that regulation will come in, and Spurs we need to regulate the transfer market. He wasn't going, right, we need to find out how to fight fire. We need to find out how to be aggressive. We need to find out how to compete with what Chelsea are doing and what Arsenal have done as well. Again, Chelsea isn't the example to use here. Arsenal is. How do we compete with them? Well, he's saying regulation. There's a couple of things wrong with that. Firstly, it's the most boring thing you can hear as a fan. That's not going to make me run and renew a season
all the
ticket.
lawyers on them. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, what's going to happen is the market will be relegated. Then we'll be able to compete. It's like, mate, if you can't do it, find someone who can. If you're not willing, sell the club to someone who can. And herein lies the problem: is that Daniel Levy doesn't want to sell. He doesn't want to speculate in the transfer market that mean we could potentially compete or even keep up. He wants to wait for regulation, and he doesn't want to leave. And that's the problem we find ourselves in, because it eventually becomes like a kind of like a dictatorship. I don't want to sound too extreme, but it's like you can't remove the guy because he owns the club.
Yeah.
So what do you do? I guess you lobby, you create protests, or do whatever the ENIC outlaw are trying to do. But what I consider now to be a bit of a vanity project for Daniel Levy, the building this sort of global brand, links with the NFL and F1 and the racetrack and Beyonce concerts, as a business is incredible work. But we're not a business. First and foremost, we're a football club. And the solution. Oh no, we're going to come on to solutions in a bit, aren't we? So I won't go to that. But in that instance, that while Arsenal are behaving like a football club first, we don't appear to be. And how much attention is Daniel Levy going to be able to put on this manager search? And he's undoubtedly doing all the things that he's created and made work for himself in doing, like things like concerts and all that sort of stuff. So it is fast becoming approaching a time where Daniel Levy needs to be made accountable, at least needs to be made aware that he's accountable. And it'd be interesting what happens at White Hart Lane on the weekend. I don't think the atmosphere is going to be very good.
And that's apparently just, a little side anecdote. It's just one of the sad things to see Pratici go, because we found out apparently from Ali Gold just recently that Pratici was one of the few people that was more willing to sort of stand up to Levy or just tell him when he was wrong about something when he felt like it. And we all know there are not enough people around there kind of at the club that are willing to do that or willing to kind of say when
it doesn't appear that way,
It doesn't appear that way. But what I would say is that I do think it goes both ways. And this is sort of a classic answer of mine, that I do think it kind of goes both ways with this sort of crisis. We don't have a director of football. There's no men's team or women's team manager. Harry Kane's future is, of course, under doubt. So you could see why, for basic reasons, why it is being labeled as a crisis. But where I do see where it is being kind of a bit exaggerated, kind of, Dave, is also the fact that, like, I'm seeing every single day on my YouTube feed, like, various different other YouTubers who don't talk about Spurs, talk about other football clubs and whatnot. And it feels like for 2 weeks straight, it's been why Spurs have failed, why Tottenham Hotspur can never win a trophy, what's going on at Tottenham Hotspur, those sort of kind of deep, dark, depressing thumbnails that I've been seeing all over my feed recently. And that's where I do feel like, yeah, it is being maybe slightly exaggerated, because why is it that we're being given all this attention when you look at the fact that we are still in fourth place position? We have the likes of Liverpool, Chelsea, clubs who normally operate much more efficiently and better than us, who are weirdly finishing below us at this stage in time. So it does make you kind of question. It's like, yes, Spurs are being run terribly. Yes, our season has been dreadful to watch, but there are teams that are, strangely enough, doing, at least on paper, at least by the numbers, just as poorly as we are. And so it does make you question, like, why don't I see, Todd Bowley thumbnails more? Why don't I see Jurgen Klopp out thumbnails more and things like that? That's where I see where people are coming from, where, yes, Spurs on paper could be in crisis, but it does seem to be a bit exaggerated. And let's be honest, I'm fully guilty of it. I'm fully guilty.
I think the difference there, though, is, Jacko, is the likes of Liverpool, people sort of expect them to get back there next season. They've won every trophy there is in club football on their club. And I think they sort of, back their recruitment, the manager and everything else to sort of be back there next year. I think people expect Chelsea to just keep throwing more money at the problem and that they'll sort of be back there next season. I think where it comes from Tottenham, it's been so long since we won a cup that it's sort of when you keep going through these cycles, every time it's heightened up more and more and more, because it's like Tottenham are in the Big Six, but we're one of the only clubs inside the Big Six that don't win trophies. So that's, I think, where the optics come from, where you're seeing a lot of that. It's always talking about Tottenham, because many people, like, look what Chelsea and Liverpool have done over the last few years, compared to what Tottenham has done. I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah, I agree.
We have another kind of topic I wanted to get to here, and it's from your man Jamie Carragher here, and he was kind of giving some reasons as to why Spurs have been kind of failing. This is actually just after his Everton match. He said, "I find it a bit lazy punditry to say Tottenham are Spursy, or they'll never do this, they'll never do that. But that squad of players there, that 11 that you see tonight, that have blown leads to Southampton and Everton respectively, where do you think this Tottenham team should be?" So there's a lack of backbone there, not at the top of the league. Of course not, because these players are simply not good enough, says Jamie Carragher. Where Tottenham are in fourth position, I actually think they're slightly overachieving, if I'm being totally honest. Do you agree with Jamie Carragher actually here that Spurs are maybe more bottling top four, not because of leadership, more just lack of quality?
No, I think lack of quality is a problem, but it's not that in itself is quite lazy. Because you can, right, well, the player's not good enough. That's the reason. It doesn't matter. You could have the best squad in the world. If you're not being led and properly coached by a manager, you got no chance. Pochettino lost 4 games with PSG, that PSG side, and was sort of criticised as being a failure. And this current guy's lost 8 games. It doesn't matter how good your team is. It's about how they're coached. And this team could perform much, much better than we've seen this season. The fact that this is the football we're playing with those players is insane to me. It's like mad. There must be a manager out there that can get this team playing better football than they have played. That be able to keep the ball against a 10-man Everton side. It's madness to say that we shouldn't be able to do that. Of course we should. But if you've been drilled in the way that they've been drilled for the year, you can't just change on a dime. Like, people were saying that why is Delaney playing the same formation? Do you know how it's about getting more out of what they're currently doing? Not like, you got to evolve slowly. You can't just change it, put like 4-4-2 or change the system that they've been drilling for years and for 18 months. And one that performed well under Delaney when Conte wasn't there. So it wasn't shocking to me that we played that same team and same sort of style. And obviously, we didn't have Ben Davies on that left wing back. It gave us so much stability. And Perisic gives us no stability. Good in the final third, very good. Like, his delivery is excellent. And, he's got 9 or 10 assists or whatever it is this season. But to answer your question, is that the reason why we're performing and the way we are is 10. There's 10 reasons why. It's not just
down to that one.
No, yeah. It's impossible to know. And we could get another manager who will turn this round, and can get more. But yeah, I mean, I think actually to finish to end what I'm saying and agree with him, for us to be in 4th position with that defense is a miracle. Like, take Romero out, and Romero has had good moments, but has been probably 6 out of 10 for Spurs this season. So it had some really great games, but by and large, about 6 out of 10. To have the rest of them don't get into any defense in the top 10. No, Arsenal, Manchester United, Chelsea wouldn't even look at Longley. Wouldn't even, the fact that I'll tell you why we might be in crisis. Because our solution to our defensive issues is to sign Clement Longley. Like, Clement Longley is not good enough. He seems like a nice guy. And apparently he's well liked in the dressing room, all that bullshit. He's not good enough.
Yeah. And also, I think too, like, right, people don't rate our defenders, Flav. Simple as, like, nobody wants Eric Dyer, nobody wants Sanchez, nobody wants these guys. Nobody is taking Jose Mourinho isn't taking Eric Dyer with him to Roma. He isn't, no one is poaching off these players to help them, build their Premier League team or whatever either. So I'm with you on that account. What I would say, just where Carragher, I think, is also, like you said, maybe a bit wrong to put it all on one sort of, thing, is that I do feel like Spurs do still need leadership. I see where he's coming from, because it's like leadership only gets you so far. You still need top 4 level players. You still need a squad full of very, very good players. But I do feel like the best place to start is leadership. We still have great players in this team. Like you mentioned, Romero. We still have Kulusevski, Bentancur, huge players for the future. It's not to say that we're just like devoid of any talent or quality whatsoever. There is quality there. I see where he's coming from, where it's like there are huge drop-offs in the quality, where you have a guy like Harry Kane, who's basically the best striker in the world, the best striker we've ever seen at our club. And then you have Eric Dyer playing in the same exact 11. So it does make you think of the different drop-offs in quality in terms of the team. Say that, sorry?
For 8 years.
For 8 years. Oh, I mean, the testimonial is, let's say it's not being awaited. Let's say we're not waiting it. But I mean, I don't know, Dave. Like, I feel like I see where he's coming from, that we complain a lot about the lack of quality. So I'm a hypocrite if I'm not going to agree partially with Carragher. But I think the leadership factor, it is the best place to start, because we have good players still in this team. There are players like Romero. So maybe it is better just to round them all together and have some sort of focal point, some sort of captain there that they can all get behind. Because we also have mentioned this too, there really is no accountability culture at the club either. And that also stems from the captain. So I feel like it is, we do need a leader. I do think that's the right place to start. So I actually disagree with Carragher. I think a leader is the right place to start.
I actually think it's a combination of both, if you want me to be brutally honest. I think, look, I'll start on leadership. You got to question, why have we had such a high volume of players coming in and out, a massive turnover of the last 3 years of players? And the answer is simple. A good leader helps these players settle. They create a good environment which helps them settle, which reduces that sort of high turnover of players. We don't have that. When you see cliques forming in the dressing room like we've seen over the last few years, that shows me that there's no leadership, because a good leader pulls that all together. It erodes the Welsh mafia, the French mafia, whatever other mafia you want, the ice cream mafia, I don't care. You don't have any of that if you have a good leader. You see them playing the likes of cricket and stuff like that, putting out videos like that when we're losing. A good leader doesn't allow that to happen. First of all, a good leader makes sure they're practicing with the right football. Like I said yesterday, Jack, they've got foot tennis tables and stuff like that. Half of them can't control the ball or pass the ball first time. Go out and play some of that. A good leader would get them to do fun activities if that's what they need, while doing it with the right ball. When you've got players that are going to Levy because they don't agree with what the manager said, in like Danny Rose's case on the documentary with Mourinho, Ben Davies with Nuno and stuff like that. A good leader stops that. A good leader makes sure they come to him, he speaks to the manager, or he speaks to the owner, not them going. So that also shows me that there's not enough leadership there. When you see them complaining about the training under the last 4 or 5 different managers now, all we've heard is repetitive, underworked, overworked, blah, 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 blah. A good leader makes sure that doesn't happen, that everyone, if they're complaining about the repetitiveness of the defensive training, for instance, under Conte, a good leader shouts at them or stops and starts saying, guys, we concede a lot of goals. This is why we're doing it. Shut up, moaning, and get on with the work. But we don't seem to have that. The players sort of seem to be a law on their own. They seem to do what they want. So for me, I think, it does start with leadership, because any manager that comes in here, they have the least say out of anybody. And ultimately, it takes a good manager to lead them, but he also needs help inside that dressing room. He needs good, solid, stand-up professionals that also hold people to account, because you can't have a manager bollocking the players week in, week out, calling them out in the press week in, week out, because that leads to what we've seen with Antonio Conte. It leads to what we sort of seen with Jose Mourinho. If you have good leaders in that squad, they can take some of them conversations out your hands and have them good, honest conversations and stuff like that. But that's not happening at Tottenham Hotspur. So I do think he's got a point. I definitely think, Jack, you got a point when it comes to leadership. I do think we have to sort of take that into account, because the reality is everything these managers are saying, we dismiss it as ego-driven or that they're removing the blame, when in reality they're right in what they're saying. They're 100% right. And, they also get frustrated with the sort of lack of leadership and the lack of top pros within that club. You also look at our recruitment. A lot of it under Paratici has been 25 or under. Them players are looking for leaders, and they've come into an environment where there is no leaders, and that's sort of why we're seeing what we've seen this year, Jack. But then you also go into the quality. I mean, look, Hugo Lloris, brilliant servant, but he can't play out with his feet. We're trying to play the modern way of football. He's no longer good enough. That alludes to the quality. Eric Dyer, useless, can't defend, can't play with the ball either. You got Ben Davies, good defender, but shit on the ball. Sanchez, you're lucky if the guy can stay on his feet. Langley, good on the ball, but crap defensively. So, I do think quality, especially across that back line, is a major, major issue. We complain about the tactics these managers that we've brought in implement, but the reality is they're only supposed to be implemented when you don't have the ball. But when we give away the ball as much as we do, that's why we sit back as much as we do. It's not, you heard Stellini say it after Everton. Conte said it, and Jose said it before. I'm not instructing these players to sit back that deep. But when they're asking them to play out from the back and we lose the ball inside our own half, that's why we're pinned back as much as we are. So you have to switch up that quality for any manager to be given a chance. But you also have to change that leadership in the dressing room for any manager to have a chance when they get in here. Because the reality is, we sack a manager, we have the next guy in, we win a couple of games, and we go on a little run, and the perception is all of a sudden that, it was the manager beforehand. When in reality, that run ends up coming to a halt, like we've seen a number of times over the last 3 years. Last 4 years, that run eventually comes to a halt. And we can't keep blaming the manager on every situation. Sometimes you've just got to look at the squad and look at other areas and say, he's been let down here, we've been let down here. And quality and leadership is why we've seen a proportion of what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, because it just hasn't been there.
What do you think, Flav?
Well, I would say two things. One, that you would say there were leaders in our squad at the end of last season. That's Højbjerg, Dyer, Lloris, Kane. There was a spine of leadership in that team that's been completely void this season. And I would say that and this isn't going to surprise you, the main part of that, or the reason for that, is Conte's involvement in the management of the club. That said, we need a manager to come in and force change, right? So look what Pochettino did when he took over. There was a similar sort of thing. There was a cabal of players that weren't going to pull in his direction, and he made big decisions in either getting them out of the club or dropping them. You remember how quickly Bentaleb and Mason came into the midfield? Two players that had been in and around the first team, but not, and I know Sherwood played them a bit before Pochettino, but he got in players that were going to listen to him, that were going to listen to his ideas, and that's what we need. Like, if we're not going to spend, we need an identity. If we're not going to compete with Chelsea and these players, we need an identity. We need a manager who's going to build a project. And as fans, we need to be super patient with that project, because we're not as much as I would like Daniel Levy to step back or leave the club. It's not going to happen. So
it's not happening tomorrow. Yeah.
It's not going to happen. I don't see a world where it does happen until he's ready to sell. And what is Daniel Levy going to do if he isn't the chairman of what goes to another club? Start again.
Even if he wants to sell, we've seen reports that he still wants to stay on, regardless who buys it. He still wants to stay on.
He's not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. We're not getting rid of him. Everyone's got to just accept the fact that this isn't going to happen. What might happen? Mate, is he stays, right? If he runs the business, if he deals with these sponsorship, if he fosters relationships with all these fucking companies around the world that want to somehow have a foot into a Premier League club, go and do that. Go and crack on, fill your boots, do whatever you want, right? But what we need is, and this is where I think there is maybe like, so can we do the, what might
go ahead?
Yeah,
do whatever
say what you need to say. Yeah, no restrictions.
There may be light at the end of the tunnel, in that we will sell a part of the club to a rich consortium of businessmen or some sort of nation state. And I won't go into the politics of it. This is what football is now. If you don't accept it, don't fucking follow the club. It's not practical in the modern era to go, well, I've got a moral obligation to this. If you do, and I appreciate it, but this is what football is. It's been fucked for years. This is just another symptom of it. But see, I don't want to get into that conversation. But if he sells a part of the club to, let's just say, so it's less contentious, a group of businessmen from America, Todd Bowley, for example, and their interest isn't in making money. Their interest is in boosting their their
returns
agenda, or boosting their popularity, or just raising awareness, brand awareness, whatever it might be.
Oh yeah.
Then they buy a proportion of the club, and their role is elevating the club with our name attached. That might be something. That might be something where you think, actually, all right, well, Daniel Levy he's still the guy. He's still the chairman of the club. But you've got these people here who are going to invest in the squad. And ENIC don't have to. They lose up a bit of equity, but they're going to make huge amounts of money by selling that equity. And then eventually the club, explodes in the footballing sense. We win everything. Levy's a hero. Everyone's happy. And then I wake up.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
No, go on, Jack. You go first.
I was going to give you a quick follow-up, Flav. I was just going to say, do you feel like, I agree with you, that Daniel Levy does run the business side of things actually quite competently and quite efficiently. Yeah. But where we find ourselves, kind of circling back to the crisis conversation, the crisis isn't on the business side. The crisis is on the footballing side of operations. And where I think you and I, as well as Dave, probably are nervous is that Levy has a great track record for making the right business decisions, not the right footballing decisions. Yeah. And so if he doesn't have a Paratici next to him anymore, and he doesn't have anybody that's telling him to make the right footballing decisions, it is probably him that's making them right now, and he doesn't have the right track record to make those decisions.
Well, you're right. You're correct. He's got it right a few times. Like he's got it right maybe 3 times, I'd say, in terms of managerial appointments, maybe 2. But yeah, he does need, and look, it's by his own admission, by hiring Paratici, I'm sure he's aware of this. I mean, his focus needs to be on other aspects of Tottenham Hotspur. And look, it's not to say that Paratici won't be around in an advisory role. He can be there at the club telling Daniel Levy what to do. But in practical terms, if he can't operate, he needs to leave. But yeah, look, what do you see this as a? Do you see this as Daniel Levy will take this as an opportunity to, just take back over complete control? I don't think he wants to, does he?
I think he is scared to have to take on that pressure again. Because like you said, I think he is in his element. He is most comfortable signing off deals to whatever soap brand, or signing off deals to, the F1 or whatever it may be. That is his element. That is what he's good at. Yeah. But he is also, I think, a bit too, what would you say, the opposite of humble. He's a bit too, kind of unwilling to accept, I think, someone to make these decisions for him that could go above him. He's unwilling to give the keys to the palace, it feels like, to someone else when it comes to the footballing side, because for this crisis that we're in, we need footballing solutions, footballing operations, footballing solutions on the pitch, basically. And he's not the guy that seems comfortable making those decisions, nor is he the guy that seems comfortable relinquishing those kind of decisions to somebody else. He's not just giving it to anybody willy-nilly. It feels like he will make those decisions himself, unless he has somebody that he respects, or somebody that he kind of is maybe even intimidated by. He seems to have a bit of a fascination for these guys that he's a bit intimidated by, kind of like Conte, Jose, and Paratici. I think that's what I heard with Paratici was like a bit more kind of in his face about things when he got things wrong. So maybe that's what he needs.
I don't think he's looking to gain control over the club. I think you got to look at the situation. Conte sacked himself. Paratici's ban came from FIFA. So it's not like he sort of, removed him off his own accord to be able to take full control. And I don't think he wants it. And this is why I say this, is because he brought in Paratici and gave Paratici an increased role and more power than what he's ever given anyone. He's sort of over recruitment or in charge of recruitment before. And I think, well, when I look at Tottenham, right, and I say this a lot, Flav, but, you've got ENIC who paid Daniel Levy to take their shit, so it never goes to them. You've got Daniel Levy who pays Paratici to take his shit, so it never goes to him. Paratici who brings in a manager to pay him to take his shit, so it doesn't go to him. And the manager then does it to the players so that they take his shit and it doesn't go to him. And then the players just blame everybody else. So I think it's one big, massive blame game. And I think everyone's paying everybody else to sort of take the flat with it. I'm not sure how we get out of this. I don't think we find ourselves in quite a pickle. It's not good that Daniel Levy, the reports is that Daniel Levy is sort of hiding. And again, by giving Paratici the power that he gave him, I don't think he knows how to get us out of this. So I don't think he wants that sort of control. I think he wants to leave it to someone else so that if it doesn't work out, he can say, well, look, what do you think I pay these guys for?
This is potentially a solution, though, here, everybody. Carragher said that a manager is, in fact, the one that can change the culture despite the owner still being there. He gave the examples of Sir Alex Ferguson with Edwards, Jurgen Klopp with FSG, Arteta with Kroenke, and then Pochettino with Daniel Levy. Do you think a manager, Flav, can change the whole culture and ethos of how maybe this club even operates despite the owner still being in charge? Can the owner can the manager be the guardian angel?
I think the manager is the best shot at making that change for sure. You talk about those managers that Carragher just reeled off there. I think the issue though is that the landscape of football is different now than it was then. The interest from foreign owners, the financial powers of more clubs. The financial power of more clubs is more significant now than it was then. Can a manager come in and make us feel good about the club again? Yes. Yeah, changing the style of play, conducting himself correctly in interviews, and being responsible for results would go a long way to making all of us feel a lot better about our football club. Someone like Kompany, who just exudes confidence and takes responsibility, and while he's young, plays a great brand of football, right? Someone like that, in my opinion, could come in and hold some sort of authority. He's a sort of no-nonsense guy with the ownership. Someone with a vision who plays good football, who is going to stick around and build a project is exactly what we need. But the challenge is in terms of changing the way the club operates, which is what the question was. That's difficult for a manager to do that because
the culture is that different from how the club operates? So can he change maybe the culture around the club and not maybe change how the club operates?
Sorry, yeah. So the culture of the club in terms of getting everyone to pull in the right direction,
right?
Like Pochettino did at Spurs, definitely on a day-to-day running of the club for sure. But I just thought you meant like in terms of
I meant how both. No, you interpret it correctly. I think I meant both. I probably mixed the two.
The culture is definitely something, and it has to come from him. And that's what I'm saying is like I don't want to go back to Conte again, but when we lose, you knew you were waiting for him to explode. What kind of mayhem is going to come out of this guy's mouth every time we don't even lose? We drew game, and I mean it felt I was there, and it felt like a gut punch. I'll tell you what. I mean, and not only that, you could see it happening before it even happened. It's like there's no chance we'll win. Even when we were 3-1 up, I was like, I don't feel good about this. But that the culture essentially would have been, oh God, what's he going to say about us now? You're not going to want to go out and die for that manager when he's ready to throw you under the bus at any minute. So a manager that comes in, builds a cohesive unit, gets us playing decent football. Even if we're losing games, at least we're in it. We can build up. We can look like we can hope for something. I think would go a long way. Remember, Pochettino's first season at Spurs wasn't massively successful, wasn't representative of what he managed to create, but we felt like we were moving in the right direction. Same thing at Arsenal. And you got to give Arsenal fans zero credit for this because they wanted him out. Absolutely wanted him out. And I'm sure there'll be Spurs fans out there that wouldn't tolerate 2 8th place finishes, but we might have to get to where we want to go. And all of that is fine if you believe in what's happening at a football club, if it feels like there's leadership, if it feels like you're moving in the right direction. There was a good example of when Arsenal lost to Manchester City, but their fans were ecstatic because they could see what was happening. So you got to give room to breathe. The manager saying the right things, not paying lip service, and there's a project to get behind. I think that was a long way to just feeling better. But all of this is compounded by the fact that they're doing so well. But look, this is just a moment, right? It's going to get better. It's just this football is cyclical. Every dog has his day. We don't have ours at all, actually, but every other dog has his day, and maybe one day we'll have it as well. But you just sometimes, like people are saying, we get questions on the pod, the Fighting Cock. And people say, how are you dealing with Arsenal fans? You're like, well, the way we've always dealt with them before this is sometimes
it used to be worse.
It used to be a lot worse. Sometimes you have to just take your medicine. That's what football is about. Bragging rights. Sometimes you have them, sometimes you don't. When you don't, you have to be humble or find a way around it. Like what I'm doing currently is saying this is a very weak Premier League. If you guys don't win it now, you're never going to win it. This you'd be bossing it massively. That's kind of my narrative. And then if they do win it, then I'll just hide under a rock for about 3 weeks. But it's just part of football. It will be all right.
Or you could be as delusional as me and just bury them week in, week out anyway, regardless of the situation, be oblivious to it.
Stick your head in the sand.
I'm going to accuse Jamie Carragher accused people being lazy, with the whole Spursy thing before that. I'm going to accuse Mr. Carragher of being a bit lazy here because on that quote, he mentioned the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson, the likes of Arteta, right? But the reality is they built up a bit of trust, because Ferguson was going to be sacked. Then he brought in the kids. He ended up going on doing wonderful things with them, and he built that trust. Arteta came into Arsenal, won an FA Cup pretty quickly, built that trust, and went on to do what he's doing now. But the reality is, the board allowed them to implement their culture, by getting rid of, especially in Arteta's case, right? You would have looked at Aubameyang, gets most of our goals, fans love him, going nowhere. But in reality, what he was doing behind the scenes, turning up late for team meetings, match days, etc., it didn't set a good example to anybody else or any of the youngsters that Arteta is trying to bring through and stuff like that. So, the board back him, get rid of him. And they had a massive clear out of that Arsenal squad. At Tottenham, that doesn't seem to happen that way. It's kind of like the players, they don't like what the manager says, they go and bend Levy's ear. And that culture cannot be allowed to thrive at Tottenham. If you want a manager to implement the culture, you've got to give him the tools to do it. You've got to give him the best opportunity to do it. And you've got to give him, the full backing from the board. And I think this is where the disconnect comes from at Tottenham is manager has one idea, Daniel Levy has another idea, and they sort of never trust each other. And that's why over the 23 years that they've been here, we've gone through, I think, 11 managers and 3 caretaker managers. So you're averaging less than 2 years in the job. How can you implement a proper culture if the average tally is less than 2 years? You've got to give someone that opportunity. Like the board could have easily sacked Arteta, could have easily sacked him and said 2 8th-place finishes. We're falling further and further behind where we are. But everyone in and around the club was seeing what was going on, was witnessing the progress, and despite all the noise from media, pundits, and their own fans, they kept them and they backed them and look at the reward. At Tottenham, we don't do that. As soon as the goal gets stuffed, as soon as the fans start making noise, the pundits, the media, etc., gone. That's it. Move on to the next guy. In order to build a culture, it takes time, especially when you're coming off the back of what we had with Pochettino. It's a complete rebuild. It's going to take 2-3 years. It takes time. And we don't have that patience. We don't have that time. And until we get that, we're going to keep going through the same cycle. The reality is, as much as the manager can come in and implement a certain sort of level of culture like Flav was talking about, getting people on the right way and everything else, and maybe that proves to Daniel Levy that, back it a bit more or whatever else. But at the same time, the board have to allow him to implement it as well and give them full backing. And that's not happening.
I feel like I kind of agree with Carragher, though, guys, because I feel like, I don't know, the manager, he's not going to change everything. He's not going to change everything, but I feel like the word that was brought up earlier by Flav is how what makes this a crisis is we do feel a bit rudderless right now, right? And it feels like the manager could be the one to give us that rudder, to give us that sort of direction. He might not finish us. He might not get us all the way, but he could set us and point us in the right direction, it feels like a manager, and sort of be that grounding, that establishment for where we want to go. Another thing, too, though, is that I think a manager can sort of, when a guy like Levy, right, who is going to be making these footballing decisions, he's probably very intimidated by the decisions he has to make because he has to get them right. And if he doesn't get them right, we put ourselves in further purgatory and further sort of kind of, troubles. But if you get a manager in who probably is more capable of seeing, kind of the end, he is capable of showing him the path, of kind of showing him the right direction and where to go. I feel like a manager is always capable of showing the owner that sort of path, or at least showing them what they believe in and how to get there. And also that sort of requires, I think, too, though, there to be trust between the owner as well as between the manager. And we feel like at Spurs, that's really not the case. And it's often kind of in modern football that it's not the case that managers are immediately given trust by the owners, Flav. So it is kind of goes both ways, where I think the manager needs to be given trust right away by the ownership, but also nowadays it's kind of like the manager has to earn the trust of the owner first, and then it's up to the owner after that to sort of relinquish some power and autonomy towards the man.
Perhaps then that this period of due diligence, if that is true, and they're not just waiting to see what happens with Paratici, my hope is that actually they are potentially looking at managers that they are going to trust, that we won't have another situation like we had under Conte and Mourinho, where it seemed reluctant to back him because he wasn't sure whether or not he was going to be here. And in Mourinho's sense, it was like, it feels like this is going wrong again. So how do I spend money then buy players that the next manager, might not want, or whatever it might be, spend a lot of money, speculate. Everyone was demanding that we speculate huge money in January. And look, Conte imploded just a couple of weeks later. Wasn't even there for a lot of it. So, it's about them getting the right manager who's going to be there and then can and may be backed accordingly. Not backed in the way that will see us win the league. That would require a huge shift in our transfer policy, but backed in a way that builds into a project. And what Arsenal did is speculate over 2 or 3 transfer windows to the tune of around £300 million. They didn't sell a single player in that time. That is massive speculation. We could do that and still be compliant, but Daniel Levy probably won't. So, yeah, I mean, it's about who we bring in. I don't know. In my head, I just can't get company out of my head. I just love that idea.
Oh, that
I don't know why.
Speech. Let me ask you, that team talk that's flowing around from company, did that give you a rock on like it did to me, man?
Right. I'm hard now thinking about it. But you can't just focus on that. You can't just focus on that. It's not just that. It's his general demeanor and how he behaved at Man City and how well thought of he is. And I mentioned QPR earlier because my good friend James Alcott is a QPR fan.
Yeah.
And he talked at length saying how good the football is at Burnley. And while they have spent money, Burnley have spent 36 million euros in the summer, but they recouped 76. So they spent about half of what they did. And while you spend that kind of money in the Championship, it's significant when you're coming down. But he said the football he's seen is among the best. So and
he changed the whole ethos of the club. The exact question I'm talking about.
The mind, he has the gravitas, and he has the self-assuredness, if that's a word. He's responsible in defeat, and why not?
Would you say Company is an example of what Carragher is talking about then? He maybe an example of a guy that changed how the club operates and how maybe the culture works there. He's not a bad example.
But I think it. I mean, look, I know you Jack. I'm sure you want this to work, right? You want the manager.
I'm almost Jim Whiting you here. I'm like, I need an answer on this. Yeah, exactly.
I think that a changing culture for me is how we feel about our football club. I don't know if we changes how we operate as a business model or how we operate in the transfer market, but what he could change is the culture, which makes me feel like, oh fuck, I belong to my football club again, and there's something to hold on to and anchor down into, like we had under Pochettino, and that's what I think Company could bring.
Just quickly before you move on, I think there was a survey, or not a survey, but there was a study done recently where sort of the most successful teams in the Premier League and the teams that have never been relegated from the Premier League since its foundation is because they actually have the lowest turnover of managers. The teams with the highest turnover managers are the ones that are up and down like a yo-yo. So I think when you look at it now, we can't afford to go into that sort of model, which we've sort of been trapped in since Pochettino. We have to come out of that. And we have to bring in the next guy, and we have to back him. But look, it works 2 ways. The manager has to come in and earn the trust. But then once that trust is earned, the owners then have to allow him to implement the culture. So let's see what happens. And also, just quickly, no wonder why Flav's always so happy. I mean, he surrounds himself with friends where their shit stinks more than his does. You know, in terms of James Alcott and QPR, you know, a lot more worse situation. He's been through it for a long time.
What you got to do.
Surround yourself with the right friends.
Need to get rid of all the Liverpool United friends and all that, and start surrounding myself with fans that are down in the Championship and League One. And
this is a problem, mate. I have no idea how you ended up supporting Spurs, Davey, because everyone in Ireland supports Liverpool and United, right?
Yeah. I'll tell you just quickly, my old lad moved from Ireland to England when he was younger, and he was a Spurs fan before he moved over. So he started going to games and stuff like that, and then had me, and I followed suit. But I blame him for everything I go through.
And I blame my dad. But I thank him as well, because even if Arsenal win the league, I'd never. I mean, imagine being one of them lot. I mean, weird people. So, you know, even if we don't win and they do, at least we have that. We're not weird.
Yeah, my old lad calls it character building. I always say to him, "Why do you do this to me?" And he goes, "It's good character building." So.
Genuinely, this is not my observation. Is that Tottenham fans are better human beings, holistically, than Arsenal are, and it's because you go look. How do you learn in life? You go through difficulties, you go through trials and tribulations, and it makes you a more well-rounded person.
We are the trials and tribulations FC. That is for certain. Certain. We come out better people, like you said. Flav, this is sort of like doesn't need a long answer of any kind. If you basically were to pick some type of solution off the list here of how maybe we can get out of this cycle, either, you know, A through B, change of ownership, change of chairman, you know, shrewd ownerships, and maybe director of football or manager, scouting department, you know, listing maybe 4 or 5 things there. Pick 1 or 2 of them. Where would you like to maybe see, you know, happen tomorrow? If we
Firstly,
were on the right track?
As
dream
fans, our dream scenario would be that very rich people from America come over, buy a proportion of the football club, with their main focus in elevating the club to as a globally significant football team. So that's that would be the dream. And Daniel Levy can keep his vanity project, keep doing what he wants to do, and operate and take the credit for this business move. Like, you know, like mergers and acquisitions, and in the business world with companies the size of Tottenham, they're not rare. It happens all the time. So the idea that Spurs can sell a part of their business, or ENIC can sell a part of their business and still maintain control and operate, it's fine. That could happen. So that is something plausible that could happen. The other thing would be, and this is, if that does, see, right now I'm getting excited because I'm just going to get in fantasy world, right? Listen to this. If, just say, money comes in from some, like Todd Bowley comes in, someone like him comes in, Spurs sell the naming rights for their stadium to the tune of, I don't know, 500. It's been mooted to be, you know, between 400, 500 million pound over a 25-year period, whatever it might be. Imagine our ability to spend and still be compliant with the FFP, because football, that's what football is now. Don't make a mistake. You spend the most money, you get the best chance of winning. That's unfortunately, and you know what? It's always been like that. It's always been like Blackburn did that in the early 90s. Spurs spent more money than anyone in 61. No one talks about this. We effectively bought the league that year, like on sort of Man City levels. The amount of money we were paying for players, no one was. So I don't want to take this away from anybody, right? But the reality is that you need to spend to be successful. But if we sell the naming rights, apparently, if you believe, we have a 400 million cushion between us and breach of financial fair play. We could potentially have so much money to spend with these like mental investors that are just focused on glory over profit. That we could. Who knows? I mean, if someone comes in with the bloody money, we could be huge. We could get all kinds of players. But by and large, for everyone's sanity, is just sometimes you have to accept the cyclical nature of football. What we are now is what we won't be in 24 months or 12 months. What we were 12 months ago, we weren't. We aren't now. So just accept the cycles. Take the rough with the smooth. It will be fine. We're not QPR.
Dave, what's your dream scenario solution, or what's a solution that you would propose?
Look, I've put one forward before where if you could get Daniel Levy to step aside and, sort of get someone in, as an affiliation with the club, but make sure this rebuild is sort of football-led, football-oriented, and all of the decisions that are made are sort of football-based. But the problem, like Flav said, is Enoch, Daniel Levy and his family own 29.4% of Enoch. He also helped set up Enoch with Joe Lewis. So Joe Lewis ain't going to remove him. His family ain't going to remove him. And he definitely ain't going to resign himself or put his hands up and say, I done a bad job. And he hired Todd Klein to sort of do all the commercial deals. So that sort of tells me he ain't going anywhere anytime soon. And he's not even planning on moving over and letting someone else sort of take the reins to see what they can do with it. And there's no one there to sort of hold him to account and tell him he's messing up either. So, look, the owners, look, whether we like it or not, they ain't selling tomorrow. Even if they did want to sell, a deal of that magnitude is going to take 6 months to a year to complete anyway. So they ain't going anywhere anytime soon. And we're coming out the back of a pandemic. How many people really have that sort of money to be able to splash on a football club? So my only hope is that the director of football, whether it's Paratici or whether it's the next guy, is shrewd. He makes the right decisions, bringing in the right manager, and gets the recruitment spot on. Because right now, it's the only way that this club can sort of go forward until we get an offer for the football club. Because look, there's been lots of talks about it. You had that guy, Lee from out in Asia. You had Jam the Jaffe. You had the QSI and stuff like that. So until a bid comes in, our only hope is that a director of football can make the right footballing decisions and help us go forward on the football pitch. Because the reality is right. You got to understand, we need the business to survive with the way we are, with the way our business with the way our business model is. So we need that business to be able to operate. But fans are also getting very, very frustrated on what they're witnessing on the pitch for the last 3-4 years, and it's not good enough. So we want to go forward right now from this current situation this summer, do the business, get in the centre-backs needed, get in the goalkeeper, bring in a cam, and send us into one season with everything done. We're always going into a season going, look, if things could go our way, we might be able to do something. We've got an outside chance, but potentially not having this position could hold us back. Not having this position could hold us back. Just give us everything we need and let us go into a season happy. And let's
give us everything we need. That's
give
all
us everything
ask.
we need. Look, just on that, just to bring perhaps a little bit of pessimism to the end of this, is that what you just asked for is going to cost a bloody fortune. Like, we need 3 centre backs, a minimum 2, £50 million each. We need a goalkeeper that's going to cost £50 to £60 million, unless you can get Raya. I think his contract's nearly up, isn't it? So potentially there. And the Southampton keeper, if they go down, 21, young, but apparently he's highly regarded.
Yeah,
perhaps he's Irish, isn't he?
Yeah, Brazilian.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. I heard that. As soon as, he's shit. Oh, yeah. But he is good. He is very good for his age as well. Madness. But so what we're talking about, maybe 120 there in total, and then a centre, Madison, is it number 10?
Yeah.
I just can't.
Are
we absolutely convinced that Ndombele won't come back and be fine? Are we convinced this? Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Can we
not use some of them players out on loan though to raise some of the funds for at least 1 or 2 of them positions?
Probably, yeah. I think you'd probably get the loan deals in. Remember, we've got to buy Kulusevski and Porro in the summer. You're right. That sort of loan now, buy later kind of thing seems to be the. I don't really understand it, but it seems to be the process.
The most likely scenario I can offer for a solution that were to happen tomorrow or by this summer is somehow get some type of people that are in the shape of form of Brentford, Brighton, and other clubs that are run with the word, and I do mean competency, because I don't believe personally that I don't believe Spurs deserve to be spending as much as Chelsea and other clubs. In fact, I think it's quite disgusting to see as many clubs spending that much money in a summer. I'd rather we kind of be more successful with the money that we already do spend. We saw that Steve Hitchens spent 400 million during his time here at the club. You'd like to think that maybe we could have spent that a bit better. So for me, it's not as much, do I wish we had more money? I actually just wish we spent it more competently at times. I wish we did. If we did want to operate within our means, I wish we just had the guys in the scouting department, in the director of football position, like at Brighton, like at Brentford and other clubs that know what they're doing with whatever money they have, whether it's a 20 million check, a 400 million check. They know how to spend it. They know what to do with it, because that's what I would like us to be run like. And I don't think that's too much to ask. I think every club would like to. They don't need a blank check, but every club wants their club to be run competent.
I wish I'd said that instead of what I said, Jack. I said, just
get
all the money.
I
want all the money from Qatar. Buy everybody. Your solution is much better. I'm changing my mind, and that's what I'm going to say from now on. You wait. We're recording the Fighting Cock, right? We're recording the Fighting Cock later today. I am going to take that. I will give you credit, but I am going to take that as my new idea about how we should move forward.
I actually appreciate that. I heard someone take that from me the other day without citing it or referencing it.
I would pass it off as my own. I would, but in this instance, you're right here, so I can't do that.
Speaking of which, though, I watched your Julian Nagelsmann episode recently. I know plenty of people know who you are, Flav, but is there something?
What with the German guy?
Yeah, with the Borussia Dortmund fan.
What did you think of
that? You did an episode. You did like a special on him.
What did you think of the journalist?
Oh, the journalist I thought was grand, actually, and I really liked the fact that he offered sort of that. I mean, Julian Nagelsmann were being sold as like, the best latte drinking, skinny jean wearing manager of all time, and it was nice to be. It was nice to hear a different perspective, or at least more context.
That's really refreshing to hear, because everybody I know hated it. That episode, and I'll tell you why is that I'll tell you what happened. The guy, I was quite lazy. I was kind of like, I didn't do my due diligence with a new manager. So I was like, it was early on Saturday morning, and I was having breakfast. I was about to do some work somewhere else, and I got this message from this guy saying I'm a Bundesliga journalist, and if you're interested in a take on Nagelsmann, I'm happy to come on. Like, wicked, like that's fallen in my lap. That sounds like an excellent episode. But as soon as I started, I don't know if you picked up on it. I was like, is this guy a journalist? And why he had like this super sort of German sort of, what would you call it? Like a bias. And when I said, are you unhappy with Tuchel going to Bayern as a Dortmund fan? He's like, no, it's fine. And I'm like, this is not about Nagelsmann as much as it is about, him having an opinion, which is fine. But if you're passing yourself as a journalist coming in with an opinion unless you're asked for it is quite problematic, in my opinion. So when you said that I think you should go for Klinsmann as a South Korea manager, I was like, what are you talking about? Klinsmann? I mean, I have all due respect, I think we might be a little bit past the South Korea manager and an ex-player. Anyway, look, it was I thought it was okay, and that's why I put it out. But it's good to hear that you guys enjoyed it.
We're more Nagelsmann kind of skeptics in some regards, so we appreciated a bit of a different perspective. Because right now he's been made to be everything is the best thing since sliced bread. It feels like right now, Nagelsmann.
I can tell you now,
it will go tits up with Nagelsmann, inevitably. There's a high likelihood that whoever we get in next is going to go tits up. We know that, but you never know. You never know.
Let's wait and see. But I can tell you now that chat with the Borussia Dortmund fan, in the circles that I'm in, a lot of people are sending it around. Give this a listen to for a different perspective on Nagelsmann.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic to hear. Cheers, mate. Wicked. Buzzing with that.
Well, look, tell people what to expect coming up on your podcast, my man, where they can see you next and stuff like that.
Okay. Well, on the podcast, we're going to try our best to negotiate the tricky situation of talking about the football club without being screamed at by a certain section of the fan, which changes on a daily basis. 1 minute we're being accused of being in Daniel Levy's pocket, and the Tottenham Hotspur and ENIC are actually paying the Fighting Cock money to not slag off the club. That accusation has been made at us, I'd say about 100 times. Currently, we're having to negotiate the barrage of requests from people who are at ENIC out to share the million different mini movements that are going on at the moment. And when we do that, trying to avoid the heat from fans that think that it's silly. So yeah, mainly that. But yeah, the podcast is always and always will be, as much as we can, try and offer light relief even in these moments. So while we will be talking about it and what might happen and why we all fucking hate Daniel Levy now, we'll try and bring a semblance of light relief to that. But other than that, go and listen to Jaff and James and Flav for Now pod. Cheers.
Love that. Love that. And everybody, the link for Flav's pod will be in the description below if you don't know who he is. But I find that hard to believe because I know he's a very popular man. A lot of people know who he is. But if there's always one, if you don't know who he is, the link will be under for you to get over and check it out. Because I'll tell you what, I do enjoy it. It cheers me up a little. There's some laugh you have. So, but like I said, I'm going to adopt your secret. I'm going to start getting QPR fans as my friends and stuff like that.
They are useful. It is great. Because you look at him and go, my life's not as bad as his life.
Got to have the right people around you. Got to have perspective. Grass is greener. But everybody, smash that like button on the way out. Everybody, do thank Flav for joining us and giving up the time to help us out with this podcast as well in the comments down below. And we will be seeing you. Come on, you Spurs. In the vacant manager position we trust. See you, everybody. Everywhere we go.